Hello, everyone, and welcome to New Plaza Cinema's classic film talkback series for Victim from 1961. If this is your first time here, we are a cinema and nonprofit organization on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. This summer, we are operating out of the Museum of Art and Design, but in the fall, we will be back to our permanent home at Macaulay's Honors College once the school finishes a summer renovation project. So definitely look out for that. And now let me introduce you to New Plaza's programmer and curator, Gary Palmucci.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. And thanks for saving me that portion of the introduction about the status of the current theater and our expected return to Macaulay Honors Center in September. Uh, I really recommend that you visit our summer location in the Museum of Arts and Design at 2 Columbus Circle. It's a beautiful screening room. Hasn't been used too much in recent years. We've had 2 weekends of shows there, and I think audiences have been delighted at the presentation and the general ambiance, and I think everyone else here will be too. Um, I over the last year or so, in order to focus on some of the other aspects of the cinema program, I started to turn the classic film programming over to my good friends Max Alvarez and Dan Cahill, who've done a terrific job programming the classics that you've seen at the theater in the last year or so. Lots of sold out shows, great stuff like The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, Chinatown, Gaslight, The Manchurian Candidate. So when we decided to come back to the talkbacks here for the summer to keep the flag flying and something that people had asked for anyway, it made perfect sense to ask Dan to and Max to step in again and choose the summer films, a terrific lineup of 5 movies, starting with today's film, Victim, from a director who's really I've come to realize this over the years, a really underrated British filmmaker from the 50s and early 60s, in particular in the late 50s and early 60s, 4 excellent films, which all of which are available on the Criterion Collection in various formats. Sapphire, a murder mystery set in London's West Indian community, made in the late 50s. The League of Gentlemen, a very sophisticated caper film. All Night Long, a version of Othello set in London's jazz club Demi-Monde with Patrick McGoohan playing the Iago character. And today's film, Victim, starring Dirk Bogarde, which I hadn't seen in many years. I watched it again several hours ago. I think it holds up beautifully, and I think Max would agree.
I would, Gary, and good afternoon, everyone. It's exciting to be back with these talkbacks. I know Gary has been so busy, as others have been, with the cinema on West 67th Street. But to be back here talking about film online is very, very thrilling, and we have some familiar names in the audience today as well. Yes, Victim does hold up remarkably well, and we take for granted the tremendous risks this film took when it was made in England or when it was shown in England in 1961, considering how Hollywood was often avoiding dealing with homosexual themes, or the few times they did, usually from a very disapproving angle. And here was a film that openly dealt with the crisis facing gay men in England, where homosexuality was a crime, and it was tackling it head on without any disguised language at all. And one of many risks that I think director Basil Dearden took during his career at this time.
Well, it also, and I'm sure Dan will elaborate even further on this as we get deeper into the cast, but it featured 2 actors who I guess in real life were closeted men in their own right, Dirk Bogarde and also Dennis Price. And those of you who saw Kind Hearts and Coronets, which we've shown twice in the last month at the cinema, do excellent turnouts at both times. Someone came out of Kind Hearts and Coronets yesterday at the theater and said to me, well, that's a film that has universal appeal. Who amongst us hasn't wanted to bump off one or more members of our family? And I said, well, I had to laugh out loud at that. But both these gentlemen, knew whereof they spoke. And reading that into the film, of course, which many audiences probably did not at the time, it gains even more poignancy and power. I guess I was trying to learn a little bit more about this week, that the laws against homosexuality in England, if they weren't directly impacted by victim, they were certainly moved in a good direction, because probably in 1967, 6 or 7 years after Victim was made, a landmark law was passed in the UK decriminalizing homosexual behavior or whatever. There was another term for it, wanton behavior or something, which I think is quoted in this movie.
Yes, and we tend to forget that there were people who served, prison time as a result of this. I was looking, one of my favorite sources, the Monthly Film Bulletin, published in London at that time. I was looking for an original review of the film, and they referred to the subject. I have the quote here. Was, let's see, male inversion is how they described the theme. It was a theme about male inversion.
That word is used several times in several different permutations in the film.
Okay, there you go. There you go. How was this sold in England when it came out in 1961? Because it opened here in the States the following year. Let's take a look. I thought this would be a good time to share the original trailer that was shown.
No doubt superior trailer.
Superior trailer to the one that we saw here. This is the original trailer shown in England, in the UK, for the X-rated film Victim, rated X by the British Board of Film Censors, later British Board of Film Classification.
Barrett, if I hear from you again, I shall inform the police. Do you understand? That's absolutely final.
What thread of strange emotion puts this brilliantly successful barrister on the wrong side of the law?
Well, if you dig this over, it could end in one hell of a scandal. And it wouldn't only be you who came down.
Fear is the oxygen of blackmail. Barrett was paying, others are. Find me one.
What crime links him with this frightened boy on a building site? And why is he afraid? Why do some people help him? Some people turn away in disgust.
Why can't he stick with his own sort? You can come home Frank Jeffries when you've got rid of him.
What sinister shadow from the past now falls between husband and wife?
When we were married, we had no secrets from each other. I made you a promise then. I haven't broken that promise, if that's what you mean.
What secret held these men prisoner in a tangled web of tyranny and terror?
I think we'll have a little privacy.
What crime linked an aging hairdresser and a famous star of the theater?
This is... and I may be mistaken, but do you ever receive an envelope like that containing a demand for money?
They are all victims. Victims of what?
Look how he's behaving now. What's happened to his integrity? Mel's to become a QC, Laura, eventually a judge even. Is he going to sit on the bench knowing that he himself has covered up a serious crime?
They're going to call me filthy names. My friends are going to lower their eyes, and my enemies say they always guessed. I don't want you a part of that Roman holiday. I love you too deeply for that.
So they don't technically mention what's going on here with the blackmail, but you have to get people into the cinema to find out.
I suspect that, no, maybe Dan can verify this. It seems to me that the origin of this feels like it was a play originally. I don't know if that's the case. The IMDb would probably tell us if we looked closely, but a lot of the dialogue seems theatrical like somehow to me.
It is an original screenplay.
Okay.
By Janet Green. There is no other source material credited. So
there's an unusual credit at the beginning where you see Janet Green and a co-author. It says by so and so, like Network by Patty Chayefsky or something.
Right. Very, very generous on the part of the director and the producer. Rolf and Dearden would go on to make 25 films together as a producer-director team. And before we continue with Victim, Gary, you had made reference to Sapphire, which also was an extremely risky project, because here you had a story of a woman who was passing as Caucasian, a woman of mixed race who was murdered. And that was a very risky theme for a motion picture to do in 1959. And Gary, you had also mentioned a film that, as you indicated, finally is getting more availability here, and that is All Night Long, which was Dearden and Ralph's modernized take on Othello, which is a modern story set in a jazz club, but it deals with an interracial relationship between a white woman and a black man, which you never, ever would have seen in a Hollywood film in 1962. So these guys were not afraid to take risks. And of course, Victim, since it was dealing with something that was illegal in England at the time, is a remarkable risk for them to be taking.
I guess looking back at it now, it's fascinating now to sort of watch the evolution of the Bogart character in the film, and that he seems to jump fearlessly into trying to meet the issues head on and back some of the people into a corner who were involved in it and so forth, without seeming to realize that the moment he does this, he will destroy the only end result is that he will destroy his career and his life. And I guess we applaud his courage, we applaud his candor, and there's a little bit of ambiguity at the end of the picture in terms of how he feels about his homosexuality and what his relationship with his wife will consequently be. But I guess that's the fascinating and perhaps the most ambiguous part of the film to me, the trajectory of his character.
Yes, and the review that I read from the Monthly Film Bulletin, the critic didn't feel that was a natural transformation for the character to make. I wouldn't entirely agree. I think it is fascinating to watch, and I don't remember feeling at all that it was implausible that he was going to go in that direction, especially after the young man hangs himself in police custody. It certainly makes sense that he would be overridden with guilt at having not taken that young man's phone calls in the beginning and not played more of a role in helping him deal with these blackmail threats.
You mentioned the Monthly Film Bulletin a couple of times. I know you and I have talked about this over the years. Some of our readers may not know exactly what that is. If you could tell us in a nutshell, and why it's still important all these years later.
Yeah, it was published by the British Film Institute on the South Bank, and they started publishing in the 1930s and were publishing into the 90s. And it was a great source for historians because they not only provided very detailed descriptions of the narrative of a film, but also they provided the production data on the film itself, in addition to some fairly, very intelligent critical commentary on the motion pictures that was often way ahead of the curve of what we were reading here in the United States before the tourist movement started to take off in the 1960s. But by the same token, this is not a small criticism. I have issues with the British film critics because they tend to be, and this is not just Monthly Film Bulletin, but as a whole, British film critics tend to be very hard on British films. They tend to make all kinds of exceptions and bend over backwards for Hollywood films, even if they're not perfect. But whenever a British film, and Victim is an example, is out there taking a risk, they can be kind of patronizing and condescending in their commentary about it, and that's something that unfortunately hasn't changed too much.
I know you have an extensive collection of these magazines, and my high school library carried them. That's how I first got exposed to that. But do you have their review of Victim? Is that
I do, and just an example, he admitted the reviewer, who was not credited, referenced screenwriter Janet Green, who co-wrote Sapphire as well as Victim. The critic actually begrudgingly admitted that Janet Green dressed up her new subject, male inversion, in a cleverly disguised crime club dust jacket. See, there's the condescension seeping in. Surprisingly, the device, though again schematic-like, works rather well, you know. And they stated that Basil Dearden's direction has the drive and staying power of the better Pinewood product, as in Pinewood Studios.
Mhm.
They found his direction superficial but less shock punctuated than most. I disagree. I don't think it was superficial. I mean, it's
Not
certainly
at all.
no. I mean, listen, this is a director who was not he was not a stranger to genre pieces, movies like The Blue Lamp and Nowhere to Go, which was a
That's right.
evening noir.
All of which were extensively shot on location as well as
Exactly.
studio work.
And this features, and Victim, of course, features some phenomenal location photography. So I mean, he could do noirish pieces. He actually did a film that was very close to my heart that I saw as a child. We know it here as Big Time Operators, but it was the smallest show on earth, which deals with people taking over a cinema in London, I think, or some British city.
One day we're going to show that film at New Plaza Cinema.
That
People
would
have
be-
asked for it.
That would be fantastic. And of course, after this, he did some other neo-noir films like A Woman of Straw with Sean Connery and Gina Lollobrigida. The films were uneven after that, but he knew how to make a commercial project. But in this point, in case of Victim, he's applying it to a very important social theme.
Another favorite of mine of his, when I was 10 or 11 years old, I'm sure many of you here know it as well, Khartoum with Charlton Heston and Laurence Olivier, set in the now devastated city of Khartoum in Sudan in circa 1880 something.
He took over that picture from another director, but that gives an idea of the versatility of Basil Dearden. So we're seeing Dirk Bogart's character. He's very aloof in the beginning. He's not wanting to help the young man. Then he starts doing his amateur sleuth work and uncovering this network of blackmailers who are targeting other gay men. What I think is very daring about Victim is that at no time is it indicated that Bogart's character absolutely, positively wasn't homosexual.
By no means.
No, it's now whether it was the relationship was consummated, that's a little vague. But
what those photos are, of course, which we never really see.
I got a sense they were taken. He was in a car with him. But Dan is going to talk a little bit more when we bring Dan in a few minutes. He'll talk a little bit more about that, about some of the dialogue that was brought out. But once again, very, very daring, because had Hollywood even attempted to make a film with this theme, they would have had to make it clear that this was not a gay man. He was being accused of homosexuality.
Well, I'm trying to think, maybe Otto Preminger in Advise and Consent in the next year or two. He sort of tackled that, right, with the senator played by Don Murray.
Exactly. The problem. I mean, this is an ironic laugh on my part, but the problem, at least, where a Hollywood film was concerned, is okay. In a drama, someone could be gay, but there was no guarantee they would make it to the end credits. Let's be honest, poor the case of the Preminger film, he doesn't make it. Bogart makes it to the end of the film, and we don't see how the trial turns out. But it's clear that he's willing to sacrifice everything. His career, he wants to become an attorney for the, I guess, presumably Parliament or the court system there.
The Queen's Counsel.
The Queen's Counsel, thank you. The Queen's Counsel. Right. So he's going to sacrifice that opportunity, and who knows how the marriage is going to end up. But he is taking this head on. We don't know how the trial turns out. And I love that fact, actually, that it's left hanging.
Well, and the police have basically told him that he's gonna very shortly be under a firestorm of notoriety, and he says the tabloids will pick it up in about 3 days or something.
Now we can argue that perhaps the police are portrayed a little more sympathetically than they were, although the younger cop definitely, it seems like he's got some issues. He's got more issues than the older cop has.
Yeah. But that's, yeah, I think the portrait of the police is a little more detailed than we might have expected.
Because of given the enforcement that they were doing at that time. And yet Victim found success in the UK and did come here to the United
I don't
States.
think many Americans, I know I wasn't, were that familiar with the severity of the homosexual laws in England, maybe even until that film, The Imitation Game, which I think was released in 2014, about the intelligence officer played by Benedict Cumberbatch, who was apparently chemically castrated for his homosexuality back when that was.
Yeah, it's pretty horrible stuff. And the year before Victim, there were two films made about the Oscar Wilde scandal, one with Peter Finch and the other with Robert Morley, that competed with each other.
That's bizarre.
What's that?
That's bizarre.
Yes, very bizarre. But they did not shy away from what Oscar Wilde was being accused of and the cost of that the trial took on him. And you certainly did get a sense of what the British views were on homosexuality. And of course, that's the turn of the 20th century, almost the turn of the 20th century. So the cinema in 1960, 61 in England was starting to address these issues. And fortunately, it helped lead to these overturning of these draconian laws.
Well, we know that Dan has a wealth of detail here to add to this, so maybe this is a good time to.
Yes, because Victim was photographed by Otto Heller, and I know Dan is going to tell us more about.
And the irony of that, Dan, is that his credit comes on in the middle of a very poor process shot in the film, perhaps the poorest one of its kind in the entire movie. That's a very ironic for the good work that he does in that and many other films.
Yeah, I did notice.
Please, let's welcome back to the fold
Yes.
Dan Cahill. Dan, welcome. We'd love to hear more about Victim, the look of it, and other aspects.
I'm going to dive right into my my usual slideshow that is going to be. Sorry, I've got to get everything ready here. Slideshow, and there we are, full screen. Okay, this is basically discussing Basil Dearden's visual style, how he uses the camera. Not too much involved with lighting and cinematography, but more about the direction. This is early in the film. This is Stone, who was Barrett's friend, who has been recovering some compromising material from their lodgings. And it's typical in cinema that a vulnerable character is shown from a high angle, and powerful characters, right up the steps from him, are shown from a low angle. These are the lower legs of the cops who are knocking on the door. Very typical kind of shot, and Dearden does not shy away from that. This is one of my favorite shots. In the trailer, the first thing we saw was Melville Farr, played by Bogard, talking to Barrett on the phone saying, "Don't call me again or I'll call the police." They cut it as his hand takes the receiver, puts it down on the phone, right next to which is his wife's photo. And this, in the first few minutes, sets up the major conflict of the story. I think it's a wonderful shot. This is England. Of course, we have to have one shot where a tea kettle steaming dominates the frame. Why not? It's merry old England. Dearden often would go from a regular camera view of someone to a detail in the same shot. And this is one of the gay men in the entourage who fidgets with his pipe when he's nervous. He's just been told that there's trouble. This is an early scene between Farr and his wife Laura. At this point, he is asked, "Do you love me?" of his wife. And it's interesting, here is one instance where lighting traditionally will show a character with the face half in shade, as if they are in doubt. Here's a wonderful three-shot of Boy Barrett. Incidentally, Boy Barrett was the original title of this script before it was changed to Victim. This is young Barrett being interrogated by the police. Bad cop on the left, good cop in the middle, and Barrett to the side. This is the last scene where Barrett is still alive. He is contemplating suicide, as is all too sadly a resolution of these stories. This is the pivotal scene in the film where Laura is asking her husband for the truth about Barrett, and I will deal with some of the content of that scene later. Bogart had a hand in shaping the dialogue there. This is the scene where Melville Farr, Bogart, finally grows a spine. He learns about Barrett's suicide, and it recollects the suicide of a lover of his from their university days. And this is too much. Sometimes I just randomly click on a frame, but I'm glad I captured this one with his jaw jutting forward. He is determined to make a change. This is just an interesting setup of the gay bookstore owner who had been a lover of Barrett and the evil woman who works for him, who we later learn is in cahoots with her cohorts, who are the blackmailers. This evil actor on the right, his name is Darren Nesbitt. They couldn't have picked a more loathsome looking man to play this role. I don't know much about other roles, but when I remembered this film, I remembered his face. This is Laura at her sort of volunteer job dealing with troubled children. And I'm just noting that there is a reflection in the window. It's a little faint, but frequently in cinema language, someone being reflected shows that they are of two minds on something. This is the aforementioned Dennis Price, who was the lead protagonist in Kind Hearts and Coronets. We've discussed him on our big screen before. He was himself a victim of gay blackmail and got into serious financial and career trouble because of that. This is another scene where it's worth noting that this is the confrontational scene where they aren't really looking at each other. And sometimes that's how a scene takes place in life. Here's another confrontational scene. This time it's 3-on-1. And these are three gay men who know each other and are worried about Barrett's influence on Melville Farr and challenging him what he's going to do about it. I just like this shot where he is retrieving from the bookstore supposed negatives of the photos of him and Barrett. This is one of the last scenes between husband and wife, and she is walking out of the room. This is after they have some sort of a tentative agreement to stay together and see what happens. And the last shot, you can see in the fireplace the burning photograph that we have not seen, but it clearly shows two men in a car, and he is destroying the evidence. That photograph was basically what got the movie started in its plot. So now I'm going to stop sharing that, and we'll welcome Max to activate his camera. Some things I would like to say about Dirk Bogarde and his career. That is Sir Dirk Bogarde, who was knighted by Queen Elizabeth in 1992, 7 years before he passed away at age 78. Bogarde was widely known to be gay. He lived with a man for 4 decades, I believe, but he never once talked about it. And this is just the way the culture of the time was. You stayed closeted and you just didn't talk about it, even though other people were talking about you. Now, taking the role in this film, and I have to pause for a minute, I have the names of 3 other actors who were offered this part. And thank heaven Jack Hawkins turned it down. I mean, it's laughable imagining him doing this.
That would not have been good.
No.
General Allenby.
Yes, exactly. Another one was Stuart Granger, who played lots of manly parts. I kind of give him a, well, we don't know, we'd have to see. And the one who I think would have been marvelous in the role was James Mason, who could do this kind of thing.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Very
It
effective.
would have been great.
But after they refused it, Bogart said yes. And I think some of this comes from his own background, his own personality, wanting to do a film that dealt with these issues. I just want to say the one scene in the film and the one line in the film which really changes everything between the man and wife is when she keeps pressing him. Well, why? Why did you keep saying Barrett? Why did you push him out of the car at one point? Why did you give him rides home? And the line as originally written was too ambiguous for Bogart. And he wanted to punch it up a little bit. And this is the line where he says, all right, you want to know? I'll tell you. You won't be content until I tell you, until you've ripped it out of me. I stopped seeing him because I wanted him. Can you understand? Because I wanted him. Now, what good has that done you? So that was entirely constructed by Bogart, the emphasis and all of that. Again, it was written much more ambiguously, not delivered as pointedly. And so he had a hand in crafting the content here.
That's the pretty revolutionary dialogue. And back in the 90s, and I'm going to say the mid 90s, they did a documentary based on Vito Russo's The Celluloid Closet, which they mentioned Victim. But it's funny comparing Victim to Joseph Mankiewicz's Suddenly Last Summer from 2 years earlier, where they had to be so vague about what led to the main crisis in the narrative, which was homosexuality, but they couldn't. The censors in that case in Hollywood, the Sherlock office said, okay, you can deal with the homosexual theme, you just can't talk about it.
Well, they had cannibalism thrown into the mix, I think, and that's
Right.
what did, and they.
But they were so vague, and there was when you look at the clip of Katharine Hepburn and Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor trying to explain the flashback or what happened, it's pretty funny because they're three pretty miserable actors because they can't specifically talk about what the story was. Whereas in Victim, they were able to 2 years later.
It's interesting, on the DVD that I have of Victim, there is about a half-hour interview with Bogart. And most of this interview was done upon the release of Victim. And Bogart cites Suddenly Last Summer as a preceding film that laid, maybe let's call it a foundation for someone else to be a little more out there, so to speak. But, he was aware of it and knew it was influential. Now,
because it was very successful Suddenly Last Summer, because of its scandalous theme and so
Three
forth.
actors at the peak of their popularity.
And Tennessee Williams was selling well at that time also. People were going to see his plays and films. So,
but the dialogue was in the case of Suddenly Last Summer, the dialogue was something to the effect of the Sebastian Venable character who had died. Elizabeth Taylor, her character was basically supposed to help him find men to pick up, but they couldn't say that. Right. So she was saying, don't you understand? We were decoys. Well, decoys for what? The film was not able to specify. And so they were able to go a lot further in Victim. Now, getting back to the cinematography, Dan, the cinematographer of Victim was Otto Heller. A year before that, he made a very interesting film for Michael Powell, didn't he?
Peeping Tom.
Peeping Tom.
Which did cross some lines more blatantly than Victim, I think. But
all that filming, it's not healthy.
Yes.
Because that's a film that we now know was really about the filmmaking process, although superficially it deals with a serial killer who films his crimes, but it really is about filmmaking. And Otto, the cinematographer, photographed that for Michael Powell, the director not usually associated with those kinds of dark thriller themes. But you had mentioned, Dan, also that Otto Heller, the cinematographer, was very prolific. He did a lot of films in England.
IMDb said something like 238.
Wow.
Now, I didn't go back to how many years he was active and divide that into 238, but my guess is he was constantly in demand, and his work was very well respected by his peers,
He did
clearly.
a beautiful job with the Ipcress file, the very first of the Harry Palmer series with Michael Caine, even using that cut rate widescreen technology. What was it called? Technovision?
Technoscope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here, he and Dearden do some extraordinary location filming of the
And
city.
oh, the film was shot in 10, count 'em, 10 days.
The whole film
The
itself.
whole film.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's startling. I mean, I guess it
I
was
have
a
no
budget.
reason to doubt you. You just get absolutely no sense that this was a hurried production at all.
No, no, plenty of traveling to locations, not that much studio work. It's quite an achievement. Uh, so shows what you can do with a skilled director of photography and an experienced director and actors. I think they had some rehearsal time before they actually shot the film, and that probably helped. But I did want to talk about
Mhm.
Bogart's career and pre-Victim. He was in a lot of kind of silly comedies. He was in a series of doctor films, Doctor in the House, Doctor at Sea, Doctor at Large. I think the middle one co-starred Brigitte Bardot in one of her very first films. His only Hollywood film was something called Song Without End, which I've never seen. He
Saw that
played
recently.
he played Franz Liszt,
Mhm.
directed by George Cukor, who took over after I think it was Charles Vidor died
Exactly.
in the production. I've never seen the film, but um, it's interesting that the commitment to be in Victim kind of changed the films that he was taking parts in. And
Mhm.
I'm just going to list half a dozen here, which deal with controversial topics that were not typically dealt with prior to Victim. The Servant, Joseph Losey, Darling, Accident, The Damned, Death in Venice, and The Night Porter, which I never want to see again. And another
Very
one,
dark themes, very serious
yes,
themes.
The
very,
Night
yeah,
Porter, I never saw the Night Porter maybe like 5 years ago. It was totally reviled in its day, and I paid no attention to it. But the Night Porter is worth seeing at least once. The director Liliana Cavani, should be reevaluated a little bit for those who can take it.
But of those films that you mentioned, Dan, a number of them touched on homosexual themes. I mean, The Dam certainly did. And Death in Venice, it's not technically a gay theme, but it is. I mean, he's
you know
he's
what's
certainly
going on. I mean, it's
he's obsessed with this young man, his character in the film. So he
uh,
took very risky films that
there's
Bogart made. I guess Bogart's career can almost be divided into different chapters. There was the Rank period, because I think it was the Rank Studios where he was first doing that's where he became a star, and he was a contract player throughout the 1940s into the 50s. And then around this time, he's breaking out and taking some risks with other kinds of films. And actually, the co-writer of Victim, Janet Green, had also worked on a script for a Dirk Bogarde British noir called Cast a Dark Shadow in
right.
1955, which was very well done. She worked on the Doris Day thriller Midnight Lace
Yes.
in 1960, and she also contributed to the script of John Ford's final film, The Underrated Seven Women from
The Underrated
1960.
Seven Women. Maybe we should do that at some point.
That would be, boy, would that be
Yes.
interesting.
And it's
So
worth
a lot of versatility here.
I
And
like
worth
how he seems to be
noting.
also in the mid '60s. He's in that series of Joseph Losey films, kind of as low, almost as Losey stand-in. The
Yeah,
Servant, King and Country, Modesty Blaze, Accident, or sort of the
right.
all studies of ambiguity of one sort or another.
because I
Joseph
mean, this
Losey, who was an American expat who worked in Europe and England.
and those films are touching on dramatic themes, because the Servant, which he made with Losey, deals with the class. There's obviously class politics going on in the narrative there. King and Country is an anti-war film, kind of in the class of Paths of Glory. So there was risk taking going on.
There was one other title of subsequent Bogart films that I didn't speak out loud, and that is Justine, which was a single film adaptation of Lawrence Durrell's The Alexandria Quartet, four novels that took place in Egypt. And I read them and really loved them back in the day. Justine is a failed effort. It was directed by George Cukor.
That's my recollection.
It's interesting that Bogart's role is the character of Purse Warden, who, during the course of the stories, is having a romantic sexual liaison with his sister. So there's another line that was crossed. Now, I don't remember how bluntly the film dealt with it, probably not too
Well, it's 1969, so the rating system is now in place.
Yes.
They can go a little further than that. But he will also, in the 70s, he will appear in Alain René's first English language film, Providence, with Ellen Burstyn and John Gielgud. And then in the late 80s, he appears in Daddy Nostalgia for Bertrand Tavernier. Am I correct there?
That's right.
It was Tavernier's final film. Oh, no, it was
No,
Bogart's.
Bogart's final.
Bogart's
It's
final
a very distinguished filmography. And
Yes, working for A-list directors. And in this interview, he was talking about how he only wants to work with strong directors, and he needs a director to sometimes bounce things off of and be in conflict with and try to reach compromises with. So he was very much a craftsman in acting. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. And I just want to note that he first came to public attention as kind of a matinee idol. I mean, he was devastatingly handsome and was often assigned by the studio to squire beautiful young women around town.
yeah, that was the whole rank period of his career, right? They were
Right.
casting him as these matinee idol types, and it's going to take a while for him to find his own, so to speak.
Somebody once said to me that seems hilarious, given the amount of degeneracy that he was later, involved with, in
And
subsequent decades of his career.
it kind of reminded me a bit of the career of, sorry, it'll come to me.
Well, I have some trivia I can toss out while Dan is.
I should have written it down.
That's okay. Basil Dearden's son, James Dearden, he directed one film in the 1980s, Pascali's Island, but that was based on the massive success he had as a screenwriter of Fatal Attraction. So,
Oh my God.
which
Ben
is
Kingsley starred in that, I believe, didn't he?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. How would you rate the acting overall in Victim? Because British film acting in the 1950s and early 60s could be a bit arch, could be a bit theatrical before the Brits learned to low key the Americans on screen. Any thoughts on the performances in the film?
I thought they were extraordinarily good. Peter McHenry as young Barrett.
Very powerful.
Yes, I mean, you really felt for him. We haven't mentioned Sylvia Sims yet. I don't know much about her. I may have seen one or two of her films. Do you guys know much about her?
I think of her later in her career, and she seemed to be a very busy film actress, but I don't know much about her in this stage of her career.
But it's a very tough role that she has because on the one hand, I mean, it's kind of her character is placed in a very humiliating situation, but yet her love for her husband still emerges, and it's implied that she will be there for him through tough times. But she was able to generate sympathy without coming off like an oppressive nag, which you often see in some of these melodramas.
I finally came up almost with the name I was looking for. He was the guy who was often debating with William F. Buckley Jr.
Gore Vidal.
Gore Vidal, thank you. And Gore Vidal was very gay, extremely handsome, roughly the same age as Bogart, and frequently was seen squiring women around town as a sort of beard. But he ended up living with a man for a long time. They moved to Italy,
And he was also one of the screenwriters on the film that certainly inspired in some ways Victim suddenly last summer. And in that documentary, The Celluloid Closet, Vidal is just rolling his eyes about how difficult it was to deal with the censorship office, how you just couldn't be specific. There were so many restrictions on what could and could not be said.
I think
So
we showed that at the cinema once, the Celluloid Clause. I think he speaks also about Ben-Hur very eloquently with
yes,
the famous
that's
scene between Charlton Heston and Stephen Boyd there, which
oh, yes, they're
that's the
talking
high
about
point of that documentary.
yeah.
fishes and stuff. I mean, it was hilarious when you know what they're supposed to be saying.
Well, if people out there may have some comments or thoughts they would like to share with us, we'd love to hear from people. Before I open up the floor to questions and thoughts from people, perhaps we get a plug in for our next talkback,
Yes.
which is going to be on Douglas Sirk's Written on the Wind. And I know Gary and Dan will definitely be here. I'm not sure I'll be able to make it due to a production conflict, but I thought I would share an original trailer for that cult Douglas Sirk movie with you now that will be discussed in greater detail here.
Tarnished Angels played very well on our big screen, and this one should play well too.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at the original trailer for Written on the Wind. This one is in color.
I'll have you. Marriage or no marriage.
I'm in love with you. So much so that I want to marry you.
Universal International presents Rock Hudson as Mitch Wayne, who owed everything to the oil-rich Hadleys. Lauren Bacall, who had married Kyle Hadley too soon. Robert Stack as headstrong Kyle Hadley. Dorothy Malone as Kyle's sister. In a tense, frank drama woven of the raw realism of life itself.
I didn't take her to the motel. She took me. Your daughter's a tramp, mister. If that ain't plain enough for you, I can put it...
As long as he could remember, Mitch, the outsider, the friend, had lent his strength to the Hadleys. To Kyle, too rich, too charming, tortured by a secret that made him lash out at all he loved. To Mary Lee, tormented by longings too strong to control.
I can think of much better things than making smart talk.
To Lucy, whom Mitch loved in silence because she was Kyle's wife.
I respect my marriage.
Haven't I? Can she have children?
There's nothing wrong with Lucy.
You've never cared about me.
Or your wife.
And why are you putting your 2 cents in?
Only because of Mitch. Because I've never had him. And your wife has. Take me away, Mitch. Take me out of this house. Kyle, I went to see Dr. Cochran this morning. We're going to have a baby.
Shouldn't have done that to me.
You, Mitch, and your little...
I've had nothing to do with Mitch.
You dirty child! Get out before I kill you!
Directed by Douglas Sirk, the master of 1950s melodrama. So that'll be
I should add that is Dorothy Malone's Oscar, supporting actress Oscar, 1956. We are showing it on July 12th, 2 weeks from today. Do not miss it. And once again, if you would like to say something or ask
please.
something,
I see we have a couple of. Let's see. We have Jonathan Hirsch wrote in the comments, as regards Suddenly Last Summer, it also delves into pedophilia. So is it homosexuality or pedophilia or both?
Jonathan, just briefly, I saw his
Yes, I'm here.
video come on. Do you want to talk to us?
Yeah, well, I haven't seen the movie in many, many years, but I did see it a few times. And I recall in the flashbacks where he's going through the streets and these young people are running after them. I don't remember seeing older men or men of a certain, I remember, let's say 12-year-old, a bunch.
They were certainly young. It was men, and they were young men that were pursuing him. So
Right. And so, Oscar Wilde, was he convicted of his homosexuality because of his pedophilia, because he was involved in that as well.
that's a tough one. I think the theme that was the prominent theme was homosexuality in the case of these narratives.
Totally. And you got, Tennessee Williams who wrote it. So yes.
But very well. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. Our host has shared with us that Otto Heller's career, the cinematographer of Victim, spanned from 1919 to 1969. That's quite astonishing.
Wow.
So that means he would have started out in the silent era,
Yeah,
and then continued into the late 60s. That's quite
Every aspect ratio imaginable.
yes. And don't be shy if anybody has any thoughts on Victim, having seen it, or more questions about that. It was produced independently, I noticed, because the Hollywood studios were seizing control of the UK film business again by this time, and they were doing a lot of production in England. That's going to increase during the 60s. But there's no way that a Hollywood studio would have taken on this project in England. So it was really up to the independent producers to do that.
we have a question here.
Yes.
How did Victim affect Dirk Bogart's career? I think it helped it. He was getting more and better roles with stronger directors after that. I think the kind of parts he really wanted, and he was a very popular actor. No longer quite the matinee idol that he had been early on, but that's because he was getting more serious art house films. So,
But it's quite remarkable, though, that his appearance in Victim didn't hurt his career, because
right.
there were cases of other actors that dared to play gay characters that found that it did, that the producers and film companies got a little scared because they thought in the minds of the public that was going to prejudice the public against the actors. A terrible thing for an actor to have to face. But Bogart took that risk and was not adversely impacted.
And it's interesting that his character in the film reaches a point where he just decides, I have to do something. And maybe that's was the inspiration for Bogart taking the role and wanting to play a gay character. I mean, there are parallels between Melville Farr, his character, and Bogart's real life. So just mentioning that.
But as you guys said earlier, did he actually ever acknowledge his homosexuality
No.
publicly, or no? He did
No,
not. He did not.
Never came out. But most people knew. Most people who really wanted to know knew. So we had another chat post that I didn't have time to read from.
Well, don't be shy, people. But if we are running out of if there's no comments people would care to make, I don't know. Andrew, our host, if you have any thoughts, or we can turn things over to Sean Moore, our marketing person at New Plaza Cinema.
Hi, you guys. I think I'm not going to show up since I'm not spotlighted, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows that we're doing the four future that we're doing the four future talkbacks. And that's July 12th, July 26th, the 9th of August, and the 23rd of August. All of those are available on Eventbrite. If you go to Eventbrite under New Plaza Cinema, you can see the titles and how to register for those.
Could you just tease us with the titles? I'm sure you have them there.
Sure. We just saw the trailer for Written on the Wind, July 12th, and then HUD, July 26th. Great Expectations, 1941 version on August 9th, and Night Moves from 1975 on August 23rd. So I want to make sure that people know that you can raise your hand at any time throughout the whole discussion. If you want to chime in, if you want to, in the comments, you can make comments and we can bring you in and chime in. We do want to make this interactive, and we haven't done it for a while, so we want to make sure that people feel very comfortable chiming in whenever they want to. And then also, I want to let people know, I think Gary and Max, I think both mentioned it, that we are, for the summer, we're in New York at the Museum of Arts and Design, which is in Columbus Circle. We're there for the summer. We'll go back to Macaulay in the fall. We'd love to, anyone who's in New York or visiting New York, we'd love to have you join us for our films there. Saturdays, throughout the summer, it's Saturdays is when we're screening films there.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
It's our first time back in a while. We're just getting warmed up here today. We've got more great films to come.
True that. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a great week, everyone. Thank you.
Happy Father's Day, by the way, to you, Gary.
Happy Father's Day.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.